Other council, long suggestion to take over the and group of years, and they go out in Sana, and long the sentient on Maron, Hamato, the Jin Shala. Here comes it that I'm called so don't like it, yeah. Here comes the song, you home, moving. Here, Chito, Maranga, long to take over and so.
As we sit here and receive instructions on the profound path of Mahamudra, we may occasionally wonder, why do we do so? What's the use of all of this? What's the point of all of this? Well, the point of all of this is that we bring ourselves into a position from which we are able to establish all of these limitless sentient beings whose numbers are as vast as the skies are wide, in this state of omniscient Buddhahood. If we think why on earth we should do that, well, then we should remind ourselves of the fact that all of these sentient beings, not a single one excluded, have at one time or another been our loving mothers and fathers, have shown us great kindness and undergo great suffering presently. In order to bring about their establishment in this state of Buddhahood, we could, for instance, do this by way of practicing Mahamudra ourselves, practicing Mahamudra in such a way that it becomes part of our life, that thereby we gain the realization, the insight and understanding that is the fruition of bringing the perfection of Mahamudra about, and bring ourselves into a position to establish these beings in that same state. So with that motivation at heart, we should listen to these instructions. So the text continues with the words of a great Tibetan master, the master Drime, who was the main Tibetan student of the great master Atisha, with words of his in which he says, in order to go for refuge, in order to truly receive refuge, put oneself under the protection of those objects of refuge, these three rare and precious ones, it is necessary that we bring about a certain measure of confidence and devotion in these objects. Without that, there's no point in going for refuge. So, starting out, doing the very first step upon that path, going for refuge, we need to develop such devotion and confidence. In order to bring about true confidence and devotion, one needs an object onto which to focus this devotion and confidence. So one needs something, one needs a source of protection, a source or an object onto which one can project that devotion and confidence. And one could, for instance, as it is said in the words of the Trungpa, one could, for instance, view one's own root teacher as such an object. One takes one's root teacher as that object towards which one practices confidence deepens devotion, one should do so one-pointedly, single-mindedly. One should remind oneself of the great qualities of one's good teacher and think of him as the only protection, the only refuge in this world, the only one who is truly able to protect us, to give us refuge. Similarly, one could, for instance, put one's trust and confidence and devotion into the three rare and precious ones, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Doing so, one should do this with the heartfelt feeling that they are truly the only ones in this entire world, in this entire cycle of existence, which are able to give us lasting protection, lasting refuge.
안 송주게 생각만 사지 아무 라사자 참고 강 한국에 살아 나는 그 당연히 바카와라 소노 아니 뭐다파 아니 레주를 콜니 양이 양도 소노 대제사 간에 그렇게 담바 단도 담바 라소 반드선 담바게 농소도 니설라소 바 대탕기라 양타바 소노 하대찬은 당연히 나사제 전부 강원도 한번 송주게 산데 강원도에
So far we've heard about the preliminary causes that we have to bring about in order to proceed upon that path of Mahamudra. We've heard about the various points that we need to reflect upon, the precious human body, how difficult it is to obtain, how easily it gets lost, about the shortcomings of life in samsara, in the cycle of suffering, and so forth. And indeed, we are again and again called upon to reflect about these. Failing to do so will only result in our not really knowing why on earth we're doing all of this, and then losing courage, losing interest, and stopping to do anything of this sort whatsoever. Therefore, we indeed need to again and again reflect about this precious human body. We need to reflect about how easily it's lost, how it is impermanent, and we need to reflect about how there is not anywhere within this cycle of existence, which we call samsara, even the slightest, tiniest little corner which is free of suffering. That being the case, having reflected sufficiently about these points and therefore having resolved to do something about it, to study and practice the Dharma, we then proceed to analyze that which presents itself to us, to ourselves, as the phenomenal world, the world of appearances and existence. We begin to analyze and examine it as to its true mode of being, as to whether there is any existence or not to that which presents itself to us as existing, as being real. And we do not stop at that examination, we even continue with the examination of our own self to see whether or not there is any truth, any existence, anything inherent in that which we call the self. If we have resolved all of these points, if we have examined them more properly and have come to the conviction that indeed now the world of appearance is not what it seems, then we proceed by way, as it says in the text, to contemplate the enlightened attitude.
하데라 추당기 여롱지 선도라스 다 노브송지 정진지 추당기 준도드나 송주생의 예당 송주생의 람동 송주생의 선도와 하데라 예담바니레 예대간리에나 담바니 긍습제 담바 간감제 담바소 단지 송주생 송의 값을 담바니데 저는 단담제 담바송의 나롱송 현내다 황송라서 강바에서 이 단담제 담바 근접게 담바송의 생진제 담도 생진게 담 사와시 생진게 담 나는데 생진 로빈세바 이 근접게 담바 이 담바니라 이게 나니 담바니가 나니 근접 담베기 차지 생진 상티라 반도서바데 푸른 롱인도 노마데 푸른 오라 다 다동이 이소 상그레스 이 예제 노마 생진 상티데 때는 성주 근접 성주 상관베기 열이.
So we are now called upon to contemplate that which is called the enlightened attitude, which we also know under the term Bodhicitta. Looking at this entire complex of Bodhicitta, enlightened attitude, this is to be put into practice, or this is to be contemplated by way of the 3 points. There is, for once, the first point is that of the Bodhicitta, or enlightened attitude, of the foundation, or of the basis. Then there's that of the path, and then there is that of fruition. Looking at the first of these 3, at the basis, the foundation of this bodhicitta, this enlightened attitude which we're supposed to bring about, we have to see that this actually comes along in 2 guises. For once, we have what we call conventional truth, and that is the other point of the so-called ultimate truth. Conventional truth pertains very much to that which we perceive, the way in which we perceive, the way in which we act within this world as it presents itself to ourselves. All these various ways which we perceive and act based upon the assumption that there is a self, and it follows that if there's a self, there have to be others. That is the conventional truth. And as we are still under the influence of the idea of conventional truths, then that which presents itself as others to us, that these beings are the objects of that bodhicitta, of this enlightened attitude, which we are supposed to bring about in practice. Everything as pertains to the second point, to truth as it is being looked upon from the ultimate point, all of these means and skills in how to deal with this and how to bring such recognition about are being given us by way of practicing and following the instructions as we receive them when learning shamatha and vipassana, shine and laptong meditation.
Long Gunzo Sanja, long song to the same Sheba, long Gunzo song to the same Rang Yin, the Numa Tangi, Drime Malupa, Sever Shepas, long de da Gunzo song to the Sanjin Tangi, Samba, Ngi Gamba, Sanjin, Dan Droba, Sanjin Tangi, Dan the Parado Samba, Nonsalamba, Rasopala, Dene. 但是到因神经当地的年梦不知道，其实知道，你干嘛是十万的设备给他的要这朗诵就不行。
So this pertains to the foundation. As we bring about in ourselves this enlightened attitude, this bodhicitta, the wish to act for the benefit and welfare of others within that world of appearances, then acting from such a foundation, or starting out on the path from such a basis, then what needs to be practiced is the path, the second point of basis, path, and fruition. As we practice the path, it means that we have to bring to bear all of these virtuous activities, as they are said to be activities of those who practice such bodhicitta, of bodhisattvas. These are predominantly the 6 transcendent virtues known as the 6 parameters, and everything that goes along with them. If we practice accordingly and act for the benefit and welfare of beings with all our heart constantly, what we strive for is to bring about the recognition within ourselves and beings of the true way of being, of that which we call the world of phenomena, including the beings within this world of phenomena. So we strive to come to an understanding of the true nature, the empty and non-existent nature of everything that appears and exists, including ourselves, including the minds of consciousness of all beings included therein. This would pertain to, or this would be the second point, as we call it, which is called the path, the practice of the path of bodhicitta.
And river de Rupana, Yendazo, Koma, Rupani, and river, and the Drime Pato, the Bayon for parts, and the river. Then river de Rupana, that in it, Danger, Sanjin County, and Zuko, and Zuko number, you took it on Longitude for Niji. And
this brings us to the third kind of bodhicitta, or enlightened attitude, which is the fruition of bringing such an attitude about. The fruition of this Bodhicitta, the practice of the enlightened attitude, is that one brings about a constant and never-ending stream of virtuous activity for the sake of beings by way of manifesting the form bodies, as it is called, which are the Manakaya and Sambhogakaya of the fully enlightened Buddha, for the sake of beings. And it is said that this virtuous activity for the sake of being, for the sake of beings, is uninterrupted and never-ending as long as samsara has not been emptied. Meaning, as long as there are still beings suffering within this cycle of existence, there will always be a stream of never-ending and uninterrupted activity for their sakes and welfare.
Rom dandang song ju je sem rong yin do nong wa tang de dei ma mi ba. Rom dandang lam je so den rong yin do nong wa me ba. Tang ji do dei lo ma mi ba. Sherab je pa le sem de dong ba ni. Sherab de yin ba la so be nong song ge yo la ye da be nong song ge song ji ge song ju sem de ju song ju so de la so ba le ye da be. Riva terana, Rupa Tangi Daka, Yishi, Muni, Nando, Sepali, Little Kanto Song, Dan Riva Te, then Muni, Nando Sepali, and not then the John Song,
and so forth. That all of these become true actions. All of these become actions with a true, how to say, which have a guaranteed result, because they are based upon that recognition that that which we take to be a self and that which we separate from that self, namely others, have never existed, do not exist, and will never exist.
Yes, I think. Riva Truba Tangi, David, Yishi, Muni, Nando Sepali, Tata, Riva Song to the Sanki Pati, and Tai Sandala, Tai, Truba Tangi, Dara. Yishi de Muni, Sanki Nilu Makuba, Nando Sepali, the Tatin Rivu.
And finally, the fruition of this path of practicing the enlightened attitude according to the view of ultimate truth is that we achieve the attainment of a consciousness or of a awareness which recognizes the fundamental mode of being of everything that appears and exists. This misperception of there being self and following out of this there being others and everything that pertains to it is completely eradicated. There is not even the slightest trace of anything of this misperception left, and we then continually rest in that recognition of the true nature of ourselves, of appearances and phenomena. All wrong views, all mistaken ideas in regard to these have been completely purified, have been completely eradicated, and then all the qualities of complete enlightenment, of complete Buddha would come to the fore and are being recognized, being actualized.
동반이 동종만에 받대라 인지게 자동 된바 현재도 예바 인지잖아 경소성 쪽에 다 동반이도 인지 예를 매봐 예니 니서도 줘봐 예니 때 현재도 요요래 다 사동하는 좀 동바당 인진서도 주 제리 잡아라고 잡아라고 들리면 예니 때니 현재도 요래 니서도 줘봐 라 다 된다와 생긴 통지기 사는 된다요 옛날용 Consonge Senjin Dada Data Matopa, Consonge Senjin Tangila, Mo Tomba, Tanga Song Jugasan. Then, they Tali, Hinji Senjin Tangila, Sambatu, Hinji, Genzo Song Jugasan. The Dada Matopa, Domina daughters, Da Yoma, the Yanaka daughters. Song Hinji Gombe Nila, Sambatu, Hinji Gombe, you're the Canadian Senjin and Congress. Tela, Teta, machine, Chodong, Yoto, Gashila, and Dashok, Gashila, Shadong, Yoto, Zongi. Then it don't have anyone though, the Tenda, Rotorala, then don't have Momo in your
an anti-enlightened attitude of bodhicitta that deals with the so-called ultimate truth, with the true mode of being. This is how things, phenomena, appearances, and so forth truly are. Now we ask ourselves, which of these do we have to familiarize ourselves with? Well, we have to familiarize ourselves with both of them, but we have to start with the first, which is the bodhicitta of applied onto the conventional truths. Striving to do so, we bring all that which we have heard so far, all that which we have learned so far, to bear in order to bring about a recognition of how this world of appearances and phenomena truly is. Naturally, it follows that the majority of the feelings upon which we have to practice this bodhicitta, which are the objects of that bodhicitta of ours, that they see things rather differently. They have not heard of these truths, they have not heard of these instructions, and therefore they are still caught up within this distinction, within grasping onto this dualism of there being a self that exists, and naturally there also being others. Now, exactly this is where the fundamental error lies, and instead of seeing the truth of things, instead of seeing how things truly are, they attach all sorts of ideas and concepts to this mistaken perception, which in turn give rise to actions, which in turn become the roots or the seeds for further suffering and further rebirth within this cycle of suffering. Instead of recognizing any given object, whatever it might be, as being truly free, empty of any self-existence whatsoever, they hold such objects either to be desirable or something to be rejected, and they give rise or they allow actions to be performed, which in turn, on the basis of such a mistaken view, become the cause for further suffering. This is to work in regards to the removal of such mistaken ideas. This is what we have to practice upon the path of conventional bodhicitta.
Draba Tata Yin Jupal Sao, the Tasanji, Songi, Confon Topal Salvation, Senki Jackson, Senkiaba, the Mine, but then Senki Tangi, Songi, Confon Topal Salvation, Tangi to Young Kapala, Tata Yin Jupal Sao, then Jupal Senki, Senki.
Now, there's one point I forgot to mention before, I just remembered it now, which one point in regards to our giving rise to limitless compassion for beings. As we practice along that path, and as we familiarize ourselves more and more with the fact of there being no inherent existence to anything whatsoever, there not being a self, nor there being anything other than self, nothing of this really existing in any substantial form whatsoever, the more and more we gain insight into the understanding of all of these phenomena and appearances being empty, the more our compassion towards those beings who lack this insight grows. The insight into the fundamental emptiness of phenomena and appearances and compassion go along with each other. It is not as if we would have to import the insight of emptiness or the development of compassion from somewhere else and bring these two together. These two are like two sides of one and the same coin, so to speak. The more we understand the empty nature of that which so seemingly appears and exists, the greater our compassion will be. Now, that being the basis from which we start out, namely practicing this bodhicitta, which is being born through such insight upon the objects of this of it, namely the beings which have not made such an insight, which have not gained such understanding yet, and therefore continuously cycling in this circle of rebirth and undergoing suffering after suffering. We come to recognize that all of these beings are actually no different from ourselves. We ourselves are equally caught up within this cycle, and therefore it is necessary to free ourselves and all of these beings out of this cycle. It is said that the number of these beings is absolutely limitless. Wherever there is space, as I said, it is filled with beings which undergo suffering, the suffering of being continuously reborn again and again in this cycle of suffering. So these beings, including ourselves, are the objects upon which this bodhicitta has to be practiced, this enlightened attitude has to be put into practice on. And in order to do so, we remind ourselves of the fact that all of these beings at one time or another, not a single one excluded, have been our loving mothers, fathers, and other types of relatives or friends or anything of that matter. That being the case, we form the strong wish within our hearts to bring about their lasting benefits, to bring about lasting welfare, which is nothing else but the establishment of all of these beings in the omniscient state of Buddhahood. That in itself is just a wish. It is the conventional bodhicitta of having resolved to do so. Now that in itself is not yet enough. What we have to do on top of that is that having resolved to do so, having given rise to this wish, we have from now on to apply every means at our disposal to bring the realization of this wish about. So there we have the two parts. We have the two types of bodhicitta or enlightened attitude, which are called the intentional bodhicitta, the intentional enlightened attitude, and the applied enlightened attitude.
Yeah, but Jenzo something, Sherab, Songju, doing this, Songju, Senju, Jepar, yes, not horror does some good, and Songju, choosing sorting, and doing for Yala, Sofa, Naron, young, comparison, Della, young, Johnson, then Songju, some Jepar, Gong, paying, then Naron, Songju, Gong, yes.
All of which has been said so far is being summarized in a verse in which it says, generosity, discipline, patience, concerted effort, and concentration. Intelligence, means, strength, aspiration, and primordial awareness. 37 factors conducive to the attainment of enlightenment, with 4 kinds of furthering the benefit of beings. All of these are the type of enlightened attitude which have to be put into practice for the benefit of beings. This means to say that all of these various virtuous activities, the 6 parameters plus the 4 which are added to them, making 10 parameters, so it's the regular 6 plus skillful means, strength, aspiration, and primordial awareness, and so forth. Well, not and so forth. These 6 plus 4 makes 10. These are the 10 parameters of virtuous effort that have to be put into practice, each and every one of them. Then there are the 37 factors conducive to the attainment of enlightenment, the 4 means of furthering the welfare of beings, and so forth. Each and every one of these have to be applied by us on our path of striving for the bringing about of the lasting benefit and welfare of beings. All of these put together are that which we call the practice of putting into practice or application of enlightened attitude or bodhicitta. Generally speaking, the situation which we find ourselves in right now is that of having come together, having assembled to attend a Dharma course, listening to Dharma teachings, reflecting upon them, and so forth. We may find ourselves in other situations, for instance, doing retreats in the mountains, going away to some place of seclusion in order to practice intensively. No matter what it is that we concern ourselves with, whether we study the Dharma, reflect upon it, or put it into practice in such a way, as it happens, there will be various obstacles. It is possible that various obstacles appear. And these obstacles are threefold. They are the so-called outer obstacles, obstacles which seem to be an outer circumstance which arise as a hindrance to our Dharma practice. There are such which are so-called inner obstacles, something that is being caused through or by ourselves that seems to hinder our Dharma practice. And then there are the so-called hidden or secret obstacles. Now, talking about these different kinds of obstacles that could present themselves to ourselves, there are those which we call outer obstacles. Outer obstacles would be anything that presents itself in that which we perceive as the outer world. There could be the elements that cause problems for us, bad weather, temperatures, extreme temperatures, and so forth. There could be outer enemies or wild animals which cause problems for us. All of this which we summarize under the heading or the term outer obstacles. Then there are those obstacles which manifest themselves as sicknesses, diseases, discomfort of whatever type of our bodies. And these and similar problems are summarized under the term of inner obstacles. And then there is the third type, the so-called hidden or secret obstacles, which are basically nothing else but their own afflicting emotions and passions, which are being triggered through the perception of a certain object. We might, for instance, perceive something that gives rise to great attachment and desire within ourselves, or we might perceive something that gives rise to great aversion and anger within ourselves, and so forth. It is not these objects, but these passions themselves which are being produced within ourselves, which form that which are called hidden or secret obstacles. So when we look at the interaction of that which causes these secret or hidden obstacles, and that which is actually being brought about through perception, something like this. For instance, if we take the emotion of anger, something that triggers anger or strong aversion, if that is being the case, if that comes to pass, then we constantly find ourselves under the influence of an afflicting emotion which wants us to harm, to destroy that object which brings
then I was 2000 내선 창나 then party 강나 party 제거나 내선 쇼점부 요와라 때는 나랑 걔네 강나네 강토고 해당도 똑같아 요리 뜻받아서라 강하는 게 제름 여당가 산다고 제름 산대거든 양지 제름 산대 그만 시당가 똑같게 봐 내가 시당가 온도로니 괜히 대인데 자세 샤와라 상을 대동 숨을 삼촌나 온데 때문이요 나랑 그 산나 샤당기 와자라데 매야나 내 삼촌나 다디게 숨을 초와데 나는 산나야 니도 그 말에 상을 자세 대인데 나는 추소와 냠린 샤바 다데 탐지라다 되게 바치지.
So if we find ourselves under the influence of such afflicting emotions, then this influences our entire acting, our entire practicing as well. Even if we were to sit down and practice a session of Shile or Shamatha meditation, we could not do so because we would constantly be under the influence of this strong anger, this afflicting emotion which wants us to cause harm to that which brings this anger about. Even if we were to sit down and practice a session of Yidam meditation, imagining ourselves in the form of our individual Yidam deities, this would not work out properly because we would constantly find ourselves reminded of that anger towards that object which brings that anger about within us. In such a way, we would be absolutely restless and completely distracted continuously, which would prevent us from practicing properly. This has been put into two lines by the great Indian master Shantideva in his famous text, The Entering upon the Path of Bodhicitta, the so-called Bodhicharyavatara, in which he says, being constantly tormented by the pain of anger, we are restless, do not even find sleep.
다데 바치라 바치 모임바 히니 모히니 나 바로 그게 나나 대사 물가와가 농조 아니 책 아니 좀뭐 아니 계속 독장다고 근데 이게 요래 옛날 양 아니 고롱 껴왕 하마니 나랑 그 파라 직접 당 괜히 내에 산다고 세바임 이게 예배인지 다니 상대 코로나 네 대기 받고 나랑 그 제일 싸워 당자 고와라 명한데 뭐지 뭐 된다와지 지나 괜히 성축의 생각 람의 천도에 괜히 된다와 나랑다 나루게 생각 효와다 삼바체나 바로 보대 름바얀도 출라 괜히 효와도 삼바 괜히 사자자용은 라소도 내를 험한 거용은 이 춘이에 진짜게 춘 내마도 그 출라나라 지도저 해근도 그 나라 책좀뭐 해근도서 나랑가 파랑 책좀뭐 나랑 드리지 호텔에 저기 호텔에 독주치기 대응 춘이에.
So now we find ourselves full of this anger, full of these misgivings towards those who appear so angry and full of misgivings towards us. And we may wonder, like, what can I do? Actually, I came here to practice the Dharma. I heard all of that Dharma already. I heard so many teachings and instructions, and I really have that motivation to put it into practice. But now, these people who bring that anger about in me, they appear as a hindrance. Now, the true way of a Dharma practitioner to look at the entire problem is not to repay their unkindness likewise, but rather to think the reason for these people, these persons being so unfriendly to me, showing me an unfriendly face and so forth, is very likely that I have done them some wrong in the past. Therefore, I have committed a negative deed, and therefore I'm suffering the consequence, the result of that deed now. In order to diffuse that situation, reminding ourselves of that simple truth, we put on top of that act in such a way as to think, okay, I am the source root of that negativity which is now being displayed towards me. Therefore, from now on, in order to not to further this, but in order to pacify the situation, diffuse the situation, from now on, I will wish for the happiness and welfare of that person. May that person, which now seems so angry with me and which causes me such distress in turn, may that person become free of suffering. May such a person be happy and go from happiness to happiness. And if we would proceed in such a way to practice this towards all of these people who every now and then appear and give us a critical and angry look, then if we continue in this way, if we practice this again and again, after a while we will recognize that these people all of a sudden become slightly more friendly to us. We might, even after a while, if we continue practicing in such a way, even get the smile out of them. And if we still keep on continuing in this way, then soon enough, all of these people who surround us, all of these people whom we encounter, will all just be full of smiles and always come to us and bow to us and show us their most beautiful face and say whatever you say. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves surrounded by students. If, on the other hand, we should not believe that this works, we can, of course, try the other way around. Anyone coming towards us with an unfriendly face, full of anger and criticism, we just apply the opposite of these feelings and reply likewise. We just return their unfriendliness by more unfriendliness, and we will see where that leads us. And invariably we will come to experience that repaying unfriendliness with further unfriendliness does not result in friendliness, but it results in even more unfriendliness. So in this way we can check this out ourselves, and we can see for ourselves how these things work. So we need to check this out ourselves to find out the truth of these words. Even if we were to react in such a way, even if we managed to do so only once, not to repay unfriendliness with more unfriendliness, but to react in a patient, peaceful, friendly way instead, then already this one time of acting in such a way falls under the category of the virtue of patience or acceptance. If only for once we manage to simply accept that which is being displayed towards us without reacting likewise, then the result of that will be that that which has caused such a reaction towards us, the cause that we ourselves have invariably brought about, and the reaction itself will be pacified. And if we should practice this again and again, then not only will the causes for such behavior become pacified and will be eradicated, but also the anger, for instance, within those who display such feelings towards us will be pacified, will subside, and eventually then we will only be surrounded by friendly people who live happily ever after. 5 minutes are left for a few questions.